Guitars live. All right.
How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for joining us. We've got Kenny here. Do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself? I gave a super quick spiel on what we're going to do, but I think what would be great is if you can introduce yourself again. I'll go through kind of how this will all work, and then we can go ahead and get things kicked off here.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Kenny Echizen. I am based in LA. I'm a product specialist for everything Vox, and also I'm an endorsee for Elixir Strings. I've been a few years now, and all the good people at Elixir have been very, very good to me, and I love them to death. I use both electric and acoustic strings, and I currently use the Optiwebs exclusively for all my electric strings, and I freaking love them. So, opportunity came in where I was able to connect all the good people from Vox marketing and also the good people at Elixir marketing, and have a little bit of a get together so that we could do some cool giveaways for any viewers and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this. So yeah, thanks for having me here.
Awesome. So again, for those of you just joining us, my name is Ben. I'm the editor of Performer Magazine, and from time to time, I host these live events here on the Elixir Instagram channel. So we're super excited today to talk to Vox. What we'll do with Kenny is we'll try to go through a couple of quick tips that he's got for guitar players out there, no matter whether you're beginner, intermediate, even advanced. I'm still learning things myself, and I've been playing for well over 20 years. Gentleman never reveals his age, but I'm old, so that's fine. We'll go through a couple quick tips with Kenny. Like I was mentioning, Kenny, we'll try to collect some comments too if people have any questions or things they'd like answered. We'll save a couple minutes at the end, and we can kind of go over those if any good ones pop up. And then, I don't know if anybody has spilled the beans yet. I hope not, but maybe. We've got a really cool announcement that I'm super excited about that I want everybody to stick around for, that Elixir and Vox want to send out into the world at the end of this. And I think the big announcement is actually going live right when this ends. So we'll be the first ones to tell you all about it. So that's kind of how we'll set this up. Kenny, where would you like to start? Because I know before we got on here a couple of days ago, we kind of brainstormed some ideas, and you had some good tips that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. One main thing is just kind of maybe basic, but it's always good to have a little review and a little refreshing information for anybody out there. This is how, basically on how to change strings and the right amount of strings and how to put the strings, how many turns and whatnot. So right now I have this awesome Bobcat V90 Vox semi-hollow body guitar here.
Very cool.
And I took out the low E string so that I could put some fresh Optiwebs 10s, 10 to 46s on them. And so I just want to quickly showcase how to change them strings and what to look for when I'm changing them. So we'll do some live restringing right now.
Now, two things I will say. Number one, Kenny promises he's the fastest string changer we've ever seen. So we may or may not put him to the test as far as that's concerned. But number two, even though this sounds like this may be, oh yeah, I know how to change strings. Like I said, I'm old. I've been going to live shows for well over 2 decades now. I've seen a lot of very, very professional bands with a lot of really, really sloppy looking headstocks.
Yeah.
And that slop isn't just visual. You can tell when a string is slipping out of tune during a song. And that's, as a listener, really, really awful. So even if you've been playing a while, hey, never hurts to kind of refresh on some of the basics just so that, your strings are nice and tight at the right tension. They're properly on your tuning pegs. Everything at the bridge is going good. So you don't have those slippage issues and you don't have tuning instability, which is a real big problem. Who wants tuning instability, especially live? So Kenny, go ahead and walk us through what you got there.
Absolutely. So I just strung through the low E string on top of it, making sure the ball end is all the way in there into the bridge and the neck, and then it's right on the saddle. So for me, like an inch and a half, you want to have at least an inch and a half, or like the length of your middle finger, unless you have like super long middle finger or index finger. I would use that as like my quick measurement, where from the post and out, have at least like 1.5 to an inch at least length in there when you're stringing it. So now I'm going to string this through right now.
And while he's doing that, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, having too short of a string is going to be a problem because you're not going to be able to tune the pitch. And I've seen that where people just snip really quick because they're in a rush and you can't get enough tension on that string to actually bring it up to pitch properly. The second thing I'll say is Kenny's recommendation of 1.5 inches is a good one. And what I've seen too, some people will say is if you just measure to the next 1 or 2 tuning posts on your headstock, that's a pretty good indicator too. Because I'm trying to measure an inch, maybe it's from here to my thumb, who knows? But if you don't have a ruler handy, or if you're just kind of eyeballing it, take a look at where your next tuning peg is, because that'll give you an inch or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I usually do that too when I'm on the lower post. But when I get to the higher post, like in this case, it's a 3/3 tuning headstock. The D and the G string, I don't have any extra posts. So when that comes in, that's where I use my middle finger or my other fingers.
Exactly.
Like a little basic measurements, you know what I'm saying? So like a little as a reference.
Yep.
So I have the string through the post. Now I have like 1.5-inch measurement there. So from there, I would recommend you getting any conventional string winder with the cutter. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to snip whatever excess is needed and put it around. I hope you can see this.
Yep.
Get that around. And then I just put I'll make one extra turn on top of what it's supposed to be of that extra post, the cut string.
Yep.
On top of it. And then from there on, I push down on the post. And then from there, I wind it. So I'm going to do that right now. So what that allows is that it's going to have like at least 2 to 3 extra turns under the string post.
Yeah, and you do want to make sure that your string is actually winding underneath the initial
Exactly.
chord. Keeps the string even as it goes down as you're turning. Again, for me, it avoids that sloppiness because whenever you have slack or any sort of slop in the winds, that's when you get that pulling of tension, and you'll come at it tune if you do big bends, if you do any sort of whammy bar action. I know this Vox is a fixed bridge, but for anybody out there really playing hard, especially when you're in the moment, any sort of sloppiness at the headstock will potentially lead to slippage. We don't want that.
No, absolutely not. And what also that allows to do, so I just did that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you can see that through the camera, but there's at least like 2 wraps, right?
Yeah, you're right in focus. Perfect.
Yeah, this will allow is that it'll push the strings down to the nut just enough so that it doesn't just bounce off the nut. That's one crucial thing. If you don't have enough wraps around it, or the strings are like a lot higher, if it's higher than the nut, then you're screwed because the string will just pop right off the bat if you hit your first chord really hard.
Yeah.
So you want that a little bit of tension into the nut slot so that the strings won't pop out. So that's one thing that you really have to be careful. And I've made that mistake where I didn't do it and put enough wraps, and the strings just jumped off. So I'm like, oh, okay, I got to restring it again or whatever because I was in a rush or so. So
yeah,
that's why it's always good to have that 1.5 inch little extra slack so that you can put that extra wraps around it that goes under the string slot. So that, I'm going to tune it up real quick. Oops.
And as he's doing that, obviously the next step is you're going to want to play right away. But I think, as most of us know, and hopefully if you're just starting out, someone has given you this information. Once you string up to pitch and get the right tension on there, whether you're using a tuner or doing it by ear, you're going to want to really give that string a couple of good pulls just to loosen it up and get it stretched out a little bit. A fresh set of strings is going to sound great, and Elixirs are going to last a long time, but you do want to get that initial stretch out of the way, again, so that any looseness or any tension is really taken care of before you start playing hard. And I'm sure, Kenny, you were probably going to mention that anyway.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. We're a good team. So that was the next thing I was going to talk about, the stretching the strings. And there's so many ways of doing it. Some people just play a little bit or literally like grab the string and just like start yanking around. That's cool too. What I learned to be more effective is to use my picking hand. If you're lefty, use whatever picking hand you're using. My index finger and my thumb, and kind of do this kind of motion, like pushing up on my index finger and pushing down on my thumb into the string set on the fresh string like this. So what I'm doing is I'm really literally stretching every part throughout the neck like that. And I do, maybe 1 or 2 laps, so to speak, right? Yep. And what that will do is you're just giving that nice little extra love to the fresh set of strings, and everything is all stretched out. Yeah, it's a lot lower now.
That's an important thing. Once you stretch the strings, you're going to have to retune. You might have to do it once or twice, like Kenny said, go up and down once or twice.
Do that a few times.
I like that you use the word lap, like you're swimming down.
Right.
Retune to pitch, play a little bit, and it should be fairly stretched out after that. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this.
So this is my second round. My third round now, and I'm just doing that whole lap. Okay, so for this particular string and this guitar, it took me about 3 cycles for me to have it fully stretched on the the fresh string set, and it will probably stretch over time.
It will. The wound strings, your EAD, those might take a little bit more. I find that your unwound strings, your GB and E, your high E, don't require as much stretching most of the times under normal circumstances. The only time for me that I had issues, and this was actually before I was using Elixirs, I switched for a number of reasons. One of them was traveling through different climates and humidity changes. Stretching strings and retuning became a nightmare. And I have, bizarrely, I don't know if it's acidic or what's in my fingers, but they would sweat and rust through strings in
me too.
One set. So that's actually why I found Elixir in the first place, is because I needed something where I wasn't changing strings every 45 minutes in the van. But yeah, so if you're traveling, different humidity changes, you might need to do a little stretch, retune more often than not, especially on those low strings, and make sure they're not buzzing, rattling.
Yeah, just a little. You're gonna go a little side story a little bit, but sidetracking. But I did a cruise ship gig back in like 2009ish, just right out of school, and you're on a boat, you're on the ocean. My fingers are already acidic already to begin with, so I used to change strings every gig. But when I'm on the boat, you're on an ocean, you're getting the ocean breeze just going inside, the boat, and literally like within the 2 to 3 songs, you start to see rust happen. Yeah, and that to me was just a nightmare, and I couldn't really play comfortably with just rusted string all the time. So I brought like a whole pack, like almost a new luggage almost of strings, and I wasn't using Elixirs at the time, so I had to bring like a whole, I don't know how many packs. It was a 4-month contract, so you do the math, like a lot of strings, and it was a nightmare. Fast forward to like 2018 or end of 2017 actually. I was already an Elixir artist already in North, and I did a 2-month tour in Australia, and I literally brought 3 sets of Optiwebs with me, and it was like a big kind of almost like a variety show. Yeah. So we were playing from 2 hours straight with different acts and stuff, and I was playing my electric guitar with my Optiwebs. We did 2 shows every day for 2 months. So that's a lot of shows. And I counted. I finally broke a string. I finally broke like I think it was a G string, or B string actually. It was a B string. And I counted how many shows that I did until I broke it. 53 shows. 53 shows with 1 set of string. That's a pretty good run. It's a good run, and it may sound like unprofessional, but I trusted Elixir. And the crazy thing was, after I broke that B string and I restrung it, it still sounded like fresh set of Elixirs, which was crazy. And that's one thing I love about the Optolibs. It does really feel like it's not coated, and they do sound really fresh. And to me, in my opinion, they do sound better and better as they get a little bit older, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I have some guitars that has the same set for like a year, and it still feels and sounds great, stays in tune well, intonates really well. I play with 11s, 11 to 48s. Yeah, 11 to 48s. And yeah, I've never had any issue until I broke, until I was mid-gig or something like that, because I hit pretty hard on my guitar. So, but anyways, yeah, like 50-some shows later, I finally broke a string and it still sounded fresh. So, so I changed the whole, that whole set, and I did another slew of gigs at the, for the second half, and I still had an extra pack of Optolibs because I brought 3, which is insane. So that's from, I was already a big lover for Elixir, but that whole 2-month tour really made me go, all right, this is the real deal for me. So anyways, that's like, hopefully this will help. And it really does help if you're on a tight budget or if you don't have enough luggage space to bring like 50 sets of fresh strings.
Yeah.
All you bring is literally like, I don't know, like a little box, a dozen of Elixirs, and you'll probably have like still 3 or 4 left over at the end of the tour, which is a good thing to have, just in case. So that's what's one plus about it. So anyways, so this is all strung up.
Okay, great.
And another thing that I look for after I change strings, in California, I don't have to really deal with crazy climate changes, but it does happen with different humidity and different pressure changes and whatnot. And guitars made out of wood most of the time, right? 99.9% of the guitars.
I think we can assume that most people's guitars are probably, unless they're using one of those cool carbon fiber.
Right. That's what I mean. Like 99.9% of the guitars in the world probably are made out of wood. Probably. Don't hate me on this for you who knows the actual numbers, but so wood and climate, they do go hand in hand, where the wood will move over time. Depends on if especially when it becomes like hotter or colder, wintertime, drier, wetter, and whatnot. If you're in Florida or anything in more of a tropical side of things, or even Japan, I had some issues when I went on the road to Japan there, because it gets pretty hot and humid in the summer. So I went to Japan in April or something like that, and it was already like pretty warm and getting there and muggy, and my neck was just completely bowed or moving in the other direction. So that's one thing I do to check is how bowed the neck is or how straight it is. I personally like the neck to be super straight. So the one thing that I check, so there's a couple of ways of doing it. Some people do this, look over and make sure the neck is straight if it's not bowed.
I will say that the old eyeball test is probably not the most accurate way of.
I agree. So for me, what worked the most is this. So on your fretting hand, I fret the first fret of your low E string.
Yep.
And then with my thumb of my picking hand, I thumb to where the neck and the body meets. So that
will be a little bit different on every guitar.
Exactly. So every guitar is different. Les Paul is like a 15. I think it's like 15 or something like that. Or Strat could be.
I'm just looking at my Strat, right? Somewhere between the 15th and 17th fret,
right?
That area.
Yeah. So on this Bobcat, on the other hand, it's around the 19th fret, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, again, fretting hand on the first string of the low E string, and then my picking hand, thumb, I put it on my 19th fret of the low E string. So from there on, with my index finger, I try to tap around the middle. I don't have a big enough hand, so I'm tapping it right where like the 7, 8, 9th fret is, and I tap. And if I hear a little bit of a movement from the string hitting the frets, just a little bit, or if I see the string moving just a hair, that means the neck is pretty straight.
Yes.
Right. But if I see like a huge gap where I could probably put like a 2 pick, which I use, through it, that means it's a little bit too bowed, right? Or the other way, if you do that, and if you don't see any string moving, or if you physically see the strings touching the frets, then it's counterbowed, which is a big no-no because you'll create fret buzz.
That's the biggest issue. A little relief. I have my Strat right here, and I do the same thing where I'll fret down at the first fret and kind of at the 15th, and I'll tap in the 7th. If there's a little bit of bounce, to me that's fine. A little bit of relief in the neck, totally fine, and I'm not going to buzz. I can lower the action a little bit if I like, and I'll be fine. I actually prefer a little bit more relief than I think some people. Some people like it super straight, and that's all they ever want. But like you said, if you have a backed arch or a back bow where the string's actually touching when you're doing this test, that's going to lead you into a lot of problems because you are going to hear a lot of buzz, especially as you move up the neck. You know, the string's just not going to be able to clear the next fret that you're fretting. So if you're up at the 12th and you have a neck going against you, that 13th fret is actually going to be too high. And you might think, oh, I've got high frets. You might not actually have bad fretwork. And I've seen this a lot on forums where people are like, I just got this new guitar. It's buzzing. I've got bad fretwork. I'm going to send it back because that's the thing everybody does. They send everything back day one. And it's like, have you checked the relief? Have you adjusted the truss rod? Because you might just need to give it a little quarter turn and you'll be fine. But, you know, that's the age we live in. Everybody's indignant all the time on the internet.
Well,
but
yeah, that's one thing. Like if you buy a guitar from like out of state, from like the other coast per se, right? If you buy from Florida and you're living in, I don't know, some drier part of like Texas in the middle desert or something like that, then it's going to be completely different. So the neck will move and adjust over time because one guitar is in one heated part and now you're in like the super high desert, perhaps maybe like New Mexico or Vegas. Then the neck will definitely move and it will have some string buzz issue depending on how the guitar reacts to the climate. So that's one basic knowledge. And you don't need to be a certified guitar tech to do this. All he did was just literally fretted thumb and then tap, tap, tap. And if it's, if there's way too bowed, then you just get, like you were saying, like get a truss rod adjustment, Allen wrench, and just a little turn, make it straight and make you feel comfortable. And then you're good to go. For me, I like I said, I like it pretty flat or pretty straight on the neck, and I adjust my string height from the tailpiece. That's how I would adjust the string height. And if you do that, then you don't have to worry about string buzzes or fretting out much, and you still have a little bit of a string height to let the string breathe a little bit.
Yes.
To make that nice warmer. I love when strings a little bit higher away from the frets because it does have that nice airy tone rather than that super buzzy, not super buzzy, but a buzzier tone. It is comfortable when you're playing legato playing and stuff. Having a low action is really cool, but when you're a hard picker like myself, and if you like to kind of do that, then you may have a little bit too much string buzz. That could be an issue. So I would just adjust the string height from the tailpiece more than adjusting it from the relief of the neck. That's my recommendation. So those two, I always do this whenever I change strings, because usually, and to me, it's like whenever I change strings, that means it's been a while, right? It's been a while, especially for elixirs, because it's been a while, right? And
seasons might have changed.
Feels might change. The climate has changed, and the season might have changed within 6 months or so. So it's always nice to do a little bit of a checkup and see, is my neck straight on this one? Yes, it is. Or no, it's not. Let me grab an Allen wrench, make it straight, and it'll play like butter again. So those are the things that I really, really be careful. And it's super basic, and it's really good to know and good to have in your back of your brain.
And one of the things that I find helpful too is once I have my guitar dialed in, and I'm kind of like you, I like a little bit higher action than I think most people. I have one of these. Let's see if I can find it. I've got one of these little string gauge height things.
Right.
So once I've got my guitar dialed in, I just measure it and I'm like, okay, that's where my high E string is above the 12th fret. Next time I have to set this guitar up, if anything happens, I just know, whip this out, boom, I can adjust my bridge, get it right, to the number that I liked, and I'm good to go. And I can make sure that, truss rod is where I like it, and I'm not, like you said, adjusting the action at the headstock, which I think, like you, is probably the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a lot in beginners where they're cranking on the truss rod to kind of either get a higher or lower action. And really, that's to address the relief of the neck, not the action, not the string height. Do that at your bridge, set it at your bridge. You'll probably set it and forget it once you get it how you like. And the truss rod should only be if your neck is actually moved at all. And for me, I live in New England. My house is humidity controlled because we have wild seasonal shifts. So my necks don't move a lot. But, you know, like I said, as I've traveled on the road, if I went from Massachusetts to California, I'm covering thousands of miles. I'm going from 30 degrees to 95 degrees, 20% humidity to 89% humidity, and that neck's going to move. So that's when you bring the Allen key on the road and you become a truss rod warrior.
Absolutely, yeah. That's, you got to have the Allen wrench or any of the wrenches that comes with any guitar that has a specific. Gibson has a different Allen wrench, right? They have that little hex screw or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are a little bit different, so always have that around your guitar cases, multiple, in case you won't, if you lose one or whatever. So those are definitely crucial because that makes a world of a difference. It could, you know, you could really ruin your gig because the neck is way too bowed or counter bowed and all that stuff. So, and also having fresh set of strings too, because if you have a fresh set of strings, you'll definitely, you don't have to worry about bad intonation or just string breaking or having that rusty string feel on your fingers. I don't dig that. So I don't have to worry about these. So yeah, like I said, I love my OptiWebs. It really does feel like uncoated strings. And I think I told this story at some point on Elixir channel perhaps, but a friend of mine, Greg Harris, who's also an Elixir artist, who first actually introduced me to the OptiWebs. He had a Strat with OptiWeb beta strings that we're still working on, and he handed me this Strat, and I was playing it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this plays great. It sounds awesome." And he's like, "Guess how old this string is?" I'm like, I was playing it, and I literally thought it was like 2 weeks old. And he said, like, "No, it's 8 months." I'm like, "What?" And he was gigging at the time. He was gigging with, I think he still does. He was on tour with Andy Grammer. And they were touring constantly, and they were still touring, and that was his main guitar. He was playing that like majority of the tour, and 8 months, I don't know how many shows of sweaty mess, and he's a big ripper. He's a great guitar player, and he bends strings like Hendrix and plays like Stevie and all that stuff, and you know, and I was surprised how fresh these strings were, you know, and I was like, dude, who do I talk to? Who do I talk to hook me up, you know?
Well, you've come to the right place, definitely.
Did.
Kenny, if you can stick around, we do have some questions. I know we're kind of coming up against time, so maybe we'll get to one or two of these, then we'll do our big announcement before we call it a day here.
Absolutely.
Someone's asked, I learned to put a kink in the string end when I was stringing up to help prevent slippage. Do you still recommend this? Now, I'll give my thoughts on this, and I think I know probably where they got that information, and then maybe you can address it. Kinking the string after you've snipped it and then doing your wraps, I believe is more helpful on acoustics. You might have a different opinion on this. For me, at least, as an electric player, primarily, if I ever break a string on the road and I need to do something quickly, that actually makes it much more difficult to get that little piece of string out of the tuning peg. So from a convenience standpoint, I don't do that. On acoustics, where you're probably less likely to break strings just because they're heavier, yeah, I would say that's probably helpful, and it can actually create a lock. When you wrap it, it actually locks it in place to prevent slippage. On electrics, so I don't really do that. And I don't know if, Kenny, you have any thoughts on that sort of method? I'm
a little bit 50-50 on that, honestly. I know what they mean, and I know I agree with you too. But when you're in mid-show and you break a string, which has happened recently, where I was playing one song and then I broke my low A string, and I'm like, oh, great. Again. And I'm playing, and I look at the next song, and the next song starts off on the riff starts on the A string, I'm just like, dang it. So right off the bat, thankfully I had a 30-second intro with no guitar. So I went over to the side stage, grabbed my low A string, and I went over and I was pinking the strings. And I'm like, no. So I grabbed one of my string finder and just snipped that and did that. But that really just made it a little bit more difficult to change strings on the fly. So my recommendation is if you have a guitar that you use on live, as your main guitar, I wouldn't really recommend it. But you have a guitar that you use up or that never leaves the house, is your studio guitar, why not kink it? Because it's always good to have that extra lock, extra tension, tuning stability. But when you're playing live, and if you have enough wraps around you on the tuner, two or three wraps should be enough for that string to be nice and snug, if you're doing properly. So I wouldn't really worry about it. Honestly, that would be my long-winded answer.
I think we more or less agree. For live, for me, it's a no. But like you said, for studio guitars, for acoustics, things you're just playing at home or backup, yeah, sure, go ahead. Someone's like, why go through all this trouble when they make locking tuners? Okay, I figured someone would ask this question. Yes, locking tuners exist. Locking tuners are a wonderful thing. In many cases, locking tuners are an upgrade and added expense to a guitar. In my experience, a locking tuner really it doesn't hold string tension and tuning better necessarily than wrapping and tuning in a traditional tuner. But as someone who's performed live, it does make restringing a little bit easier. So that's kind of my takeaway when I had a Strat with locking tuners. Did make string changes maybe a little easier, maybe a little quicker. I don't think that I found any difference in tuning stability. But Kenny, I'd like to hear your thoughts on locking tuners and whether we should just do away with regular tuning pegs altogether.
Right. Well, I mean, if yes, I do like locking tuners as well, especially if they're staggered, meaning the post has a different height so that it's pushing down the string. If it's staggered and if it's a locking tuner, by all means, go for it. Absolutely. But I just personally like to still have extra one wrap around the locking tuners just to secure that extra push into the nut slot. So regardless, I would still have a little bit of a wrap in my it just makes changing string changing a little bit easier. But personally, I wouldn't really find it any different, honestly, if you're used to it, because certain locking tuners require tools. Some locking tuners require like a piece of penny to unlock.
Yeah, you have to
which could be a drag because if you don't have a penny around you, then you're screwed. Right? And so it all just depends on how comfortable you are changing strings. Me personally, I just been grew up playing with non-locking tuners, so I'm super used to changing strings with a conventional regular tuners, so I could change strings literally within 30 seconds. I mean, that I could do. But if somebody grew up changing strings with a locking tuner and they could do it all the time and on the fly, by all means do it. There's no right or wrong answer for this. So yeah,
like if your guitar comes with it, great. If you find it's an upgrade you want to make, awesome. I wouldn't go out of my way to add locking tuners to my personal guitars, but you do you. And I think I've given my reasons why and why not. Kenny, we're running against the clock here, but I think a little birdie tells me that we maybe have some sort of special announcement / giveaway. I don't know if do you want to spill the beans on what that is?
Yeah. So it might be you may or may not get a free Bobcat.
All right. So yeah, Bobcat looks pretty darn sweet. Want to tell us about it real quick?
Yes. So Bobcat V90 is a semi-hollow body with a center block, super lightweight, 25-inch scale length neck, which makes it in between like a Strat scale or a Gibson scale, for lack of better words. So you're still getting that nice little snap, but a little bit slinkier. So it's a really cool little semi-hollow body guitar, and with our proprietary pickups, which is kind of similar to almost like a Jazz Master sort of vibe, tone-wise. and you get this really beautiful, jangly, fast single coil tone if you have the volume all the way up. And if you turn on the volume on the guitar around like 8, and it'll turn into a cool like vintage P90 sound. And it's just a really awesome guitar. And this, if you go onto our channel, on our YouTube channel, there's a lot of videos of us playing this, myself included. So go and check that out for sure. So this, the Bobcat V90, is an incredible guitar. Rover tuner, strong, stable tuner. You don't have to worry about any strings slipping around or anything like that. If you learn, if you know how to wind them strings, and yeah, so it's this incredible guitar could be yours.
So if you are watching, or if you're watching the archive version of this the next day, the news will be on the Elixir channel, and I'm sure the Vox channels as well. So stay tuned to whatever social media you follow. You'll get the info on how you could potentially win this killer guitar. If you've been on the Performer Magazine YouTube channel recently, we put together a mixtape this past holiday season, and we featured a new record, actually, self-promo here. We featured a new recording with the Bobcat featuring the artist Fox, so you can actually hear the guitar in action. We did a little behind-the-scenes video too, so you can check that out. Give it a listen if it's something that you're interested in winning. Stay tuned for the details, both on this channel and on the Vox channels. And good luck to everybody. If you do end up winning, please make some posts so we can hear all about it and hear how it sounds.
Yeah, awesome. This is great.
I want to give a big thank you to Kenny for joining us from Vox today, for walking through a couple really cool tips. Hopefully you learned something. Yes, be sure to string up with Elixirs the next time you do a proper restringing job. And Kenny, where can people find you online if they so desire?
Just search my name, Kenny Echizen. I have my personal Instagram and social media out there. You'll see a lot of my Vox videos out there too, and all my gigs and all that stuff that I do outside. So yeah, love to hit me up and talk strings, talk guitar, talk gear. I could do that all.
So reach out to Kenny if you've got any gear questions. Get your Elixir strings and stay tuned for info on that giveaway. And with that, we will say goodbye. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you for allowing us to host this yet again, Elixir. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Signing off.